Okay, Alexander, let's talk about the summit between the United States and China in Alaska. And you did a video on this, a really in-depth breakdown video on this. And I did a video today, which I'm going to publish, where I just kind of took a snippet of that exchange. So your video got into a lot of the complexities of the situation, put everything in context, scolded Blinken for his performance. I did a video on my channel where I just took a snippet of the conversation between the Chinese official and Blinken and just kind of for 5 minutes just talked about the body language. And I think we both came to the same conclusion. Your video doing a breakdown, an analytical breakdown, mine just kind of looking at a 1.5 minute exchange between the Chinese official and Blinken, and I think they both tell the same story, that Blinken came off incredibly weak, scripted, once again scripted, reading from a script, just out of his depth, completely out of his depth. And the Chinese official, when I was looking at the way he was talking with Blinken, it was almost as if he was ordering Blinken around in a way. I mean, he definitely felt like he had the upper hand. He definitely felt like he had the leverage, that China had the leverage. And he even told Blinken that much. He even said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, the U.S. doesn't have any leverage over us and doesn't have any right to tell us what to do. But pretty much those were the words that he used. And Blinken, he just sat there, it seemed, and just took it all. It was quite an incredible exchange, to be honest. And I don't know, what does this mean? Does this mean anything?
Well, I think it does, because of course the whole world is watching, and the whole world was watching this particular summit. There has been massive embarrassment in Europe at the performance they saw in Alaska, in Anchorage, because of course the Europeans have been told, that this is the new administration. It's all these competent, people, experienced, the professionals are back after supposedly the chaos of the Trump years, and they were going to take a consistent and clear line on China, and they're going to take a strong line on China. And I think there's shock right across Europe when they saw what these professionals, people like Blinken, are really amount to. And I think you characterized it perfectly. You had Blinken looking completely unprepared, woefully out of his depth, and you had these two Chinese officials, Politburo member Yang and Foreign Minister Wang, and they just made him look like, frankly, I thought, a student straight out of some international relations school. I mean, he just didn't have what it takes to conduct foreign policy at this level. And it's bad enough that that's what happens, that, you have all of these exchanges take place in that way. But it was all done in public, so the whole world sees it, not just, the diplomats themselves, but the whole world has seen this abject humiliation of the Secretary of State of the United States by his Chinese counterparts. I've never known anything like this to happen before. The Chinese, as I was saying in my program, the one I did on my channel, are absolutely cock-a-hoop about this. They're gloating. And I don't think that's too strong a word about the clear-cut win that they sense they got. And the impression we have, the impression the world is getting, is of an administration that is dysfunctional, that its vaunted professionals are bungling amateurs, and that they are simply not up to dealing with China, and that the Chinese are just able to run rings around them, as happened on this occasion. Now, there was a fascinating article which I was trying to, I read it last night and I tried to find it again today, but it seems to have vanished off the off the internet. But as I remember, it was in The Spectator, which is one of the big heavyweight British news magazines, and in the aftermath of this summit, it said that this is the worst start in terms of foreign policy of any US administration ever. And I think that's about right. I mean, a complete debacle with China in Anchorage, a complete debacle with Russia over that disastrous interview with George Stephanopoulos, and a huge sense, I think, around the world that the US simply doesn't know, at least this administration doesn't really have a clue what to do or how to go about doing things. There's some comments about this being, like it was in Jimmy Carter's day. But Carter, who was maybe out of his depth in international diplomacy, did have some very, very capable people. He had Cyrus Vance as his Secretary of State. He was an immensely experienced and very capable Secretary of State. And he had Zbigniew Brzezinski, who, whatever one thinks about him, was nonetheless a person with all his weak problems. Nonetheless, he was a personality. Blinken isn't even a personality. I mean, it was awful. You are from a diplomatic family. You are very familiar with the way in which diplomacy is conducted. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Because I haven't. Not the United States being lectured at and humiliated in a public venue on US territory, by the way, in that kind of way.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. I would say that if I was an alien visiting the United States, visiting planet Earth, and I was watching this exchange, I would have thought, number one, this guy Blinken must be some sort of student, or must be this guy's student, or someone who's kind of just learning the ropes. I would have thought that when I looked at him. I mean, he did not look like a diplomat of any type of caliber. I mean, I've seen people come out of Georgetown University that probably have better diplomatic skills than Blinken. I also would have thought, if I was an alien that just dropped down to Earth, I would have thought that China's the big dog. China's the number one economy. China's the number one superpower. Looking at this exchange, so I mean, my question is, under different circumstances, a different administration, I would say that this may have been a one-off. Bad performance anxiety, new administration. Probably they shouldn't have put it on TV. Big mistake. But I would say, okay, let's chalk it up to just a bad day on the pitch and let's move forward. But I don't think this is going to be a bad day on the pitch type event. I would probably say this is going to be the norm going forward for this administration. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think this is as good as it gets, if you like. I mean, let's think about this. This was a meeting which it was the United States that proposed, and which the United States was prepared for. I mean, they came up with all they no doubt, worked on it and decided what their positions were going to be, and they, would have done one assumes, some kind of homework in preparation for it. And when the meeting happens, what happens? The US delegation, it's a crash and burn. I mean, they're shot to pieces within the first hour. I mean, it's just awful to see. And I don't see it getting any better, because I don't think these people have it in them to do better. I mean, you have a president who, we're going to be kind. He's obviously not fully competent or capable of running policy anymore. I mean, we've all saw those pictures of him struggling to get, up into Air Force One. We've also seen these really bizarre missteps he makes when he speaks, and these rather strange speeches where he goes off, meandering off topic, and gets himself mixed up and can't remember who his defense secretary is, and can't remember the name of the Pentagon and all that sort of thing. We have a Secretary of State who looks completely outmatched and absolutely lacking in any kind of gravitas. And we have an administration which is completely dysfunctional in every other possible respect. populated by dangerous neocons or pushing in different directions, unable to formulate a policy, and unable to basically even get its act together in preparation for a summit with China, which it itself called. Now, the problem is, this isn't an easy time for the United States. It's going through major changes internally. It has a major challenge from China. There is a alliance now, which is gradually forming between China and Russia. It has been challenged as never before. And you need a strong pair of hands and a disciplined administration to work through this period and to lead the United States during it. And you talked about previous administrations. And I'm going to remind our viewers of Donald Trump's first interactions with China. He did invite the Chinese to Washington, to the United States. He invited them, in fact, to Mar-a-Lago, which, bear in mind, he treated as his other White House. He arranged for the Chinese delegation to be led by no less a person than Xi Jinping himself. He was very careful not to have the meetings, publicly televised in that fashion. He made a major effort to get to understand Xi Jinping and to get on with him. And in fact, apparently the chemistry between the two men worked well. And of course, as we know, Trump went on from there to take increasingly tough lines with China on all sorts of issues: trade, economics, the South China Sea, and whatever. But the Chinese, in terms of Trump himself, they got to know him, they got to respect him. Grudgingly, they even came to like him. That is how you conduct diplomacy. Not this bizarre way where you set yourself up for some kind of showdown on the cameras and then get shown down. I mean, it's the contrast between the administrations is remarkable. Now, you may think that Donald Trump's direction of travel was the wrong one, but I mean, to say it frankly, he looks like the professional. It's Blinken and his team that come across as the amateurs.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that Biden can't meet with Xi, and they know it. That's just my hunch. They know that he can't meet with Xi. They know he doesn't have the stamina to meet with Xi or any world leader. So once again, it goes back to what we've said in previous videos. Everyone else has to kind of, for lack of a better word, cover for him. I don't want to say that's what they're doing. I think they enjoy kind of being this executive board of presidents, which is what we seem to have. Blinken, Harris, all these people kind of taking up different roles and acting as presidents in their own right. But so Trump, invited him to Mar-a-Lago, his domain, his turf. He got Xi to come, president against president. What I thought was amazing about this is when Trump would have meetings with Xi, they were talking about things of substance, most importantly, trade and the economic financial situation between the two countries and whatever imbalances each one perceived of the other. This one, and I'm going to cite to you a specific exchange, once again I'm paraphrasing, this one we saw Blinken talk about, once again, scripted, reading from a script, clearly reading from a script, talking about America is back. Once again, that line, that canned line, America is back, talking about how the world is happy to see America back. Once again, a scripted line. It was an absolute disgrace. He was stuck in this woke ideology, this PR narrative that they're floating out on CNN and MSNBC, and he's just repeating it back to the Chinese. And the Chinese's response was, don't talk to us about America's back. Don't talk to us about democracy. Don't talk to us about your superior society or your superior values. A country that has, and China pretty much spelled it out, a country that has these BLM shenanigans, that has these identity politics debates, that is going through this equity, critical race theory restructuring of the country. I mean, literally, they were just throwing this back out at him, and Blinken was just speechless. I've never seen anything like it in my life. This is a turning point, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. It's
absolutely.
I understand now why China wanted Biden to win so bad. I mean, it's crystal clear now.
Absolutely. Well, can I just say, first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, Blinken's comments were just a recitation of cliches. They were just a recitation of Democratic Party talking points, which, we've heard endlessly regurgitated. America is back. What does that even mean? I mean, the Chinese dealt extensively with Trump. I mean, I've just talked about, the Mar-a-Lago summit, but of course, which is, the very first important summit Donald Trump had as president. But there were many interactions between Trump and Xi Jinping. They spoke regularly on the phone, for example. They talked about trade, they talked about economics, they talked about the South China Sea. They talked an awful lot about North Korea also, by the way. You're quite right. Nobody expects Biden to do the same with Xi Jinping. And given that extent, that degree of interaction between Trump and Xi Jinping, when the Chinese hear Blinken, who's making a complete mess of everything else, tell them that America is back, as if it was not around when Donald Trump was president, they must be absolutely incredulous, and they're probably laughing to themselves. They're saying, who are these people? Do they really know what they're about? And unsurprising, completely unsurprisingly, the Chinese, who follow the news in the US very closely, they read the US newspapers, they listen to US television, they see what things Americans say. Of course, they've highlighted all the growing internal weaknesses and problems in the United States. And to Blinken's astonishment, they threw them back at America's face. And, I've now been reading, because, the commentaries after the summit in the Chinese media, I discussed them at length in my own video, which I did from my own channel. But the commentaries are extraordinary. I mean, consider this. This is from the Chinese media, this is from Global Times. The US's sense of crisis stems fundamentally from the decline of its comprehensive competitiveness. Its hegemonic framework remains roughly the same, yet its internal supportive power is weakening, because they see all the things that you were talking about, BLM, protests, lack of competition by the US economy, the fact that, globalization, all of those things. And they say the US is getting weaker. And they come along to Anchorage, they meet the Secretary of State of the United States, and whereas once upon a time, the United States had secretaries of state of the caliber of Henry Stimson and George Marshall and Dean Acheson and Cyrus Vance and all those sort of people, George Shultz, they come across Tony Blinken, who, as you said, reads cliches from a few notes that are put in front of them and in front of him. And all these beliefs the Chinese have that the United States is losing its way, that it's weakening internally, are going to be confirmed. And they're going to go away back to Beijing, energized and strengthened and even more confident than they were before. I mean, this is what this summit has achieved. It has demonstrated to the Chinese that their analysis that the US is weakening is the right one. And we will see what the Chinese do in response to that. And you're absolutely right. I think if Donald Trump the Chinese felt they had an adversary to be reckoned with, even though much that he did made them very angry. And in Joe Biden and Tony Blinken, they have, well, an old man and a fool.
Yeah. No, I mean, no matter how much Trump angered them, they respected him. And
Absolutely.
when they respected Trump, they respected America. This is
Absolutely.
a complete, I mean, we've gone into a completely different situation. Just let me rattle off to you. We'll finish off the video. Let me rattle off to you. Just last week, and I'll take this from the top of my head too, so if I missed something, let me know. Guys in the comments, if I missed something, let me know. Just last week, he called Vladimir Putin a killer, Joe Biden. He fell 3 times going up the stairs of Air Force One. He called Kamala Harris president. He refuses to give a State of the Union or a press conference still. And you had this disaster in Alaska. I don't know, am I missing? That was just 1 week ago. 1 week. That's a 5-day span.
No, that's just the worst.
And the border,
Start.
sorry, and the border.
And the border, which of course we're not allowed to talk about, or at least people aren't talking about it. I mean, it's a shambolic performance, and as you say, there is no reason to think that it's going to get better. How can it? Nothing is going to, give Joe Biden his vigor back. Nothing is going to make Tony Blinken less of a fool. I mean, it seems to me that's baked in the cake now. And nothing is going to make Kamala Harris a credible leader of the United States. I mean, these people are not up to the responsibilities that they've been given. I mean, that's not just my opinion, that's increasingly the world's. That's China's opinion. And China is, of course, the country to be concerned about and to worry about. And of course, you have Putin in his usual sly way wishing Joe Biden good health and saying, well, I'm not being ironic when I say that, when of course we all know that he is, and challenging Biden to an open dialogue with the TV cameras. Well, when Blinken has an open dialogue with the TV cameras, we see what happens. How can they ever risk exposing Biden to something like that? How can they risk ever setting Biden and Putin off against each other, or Biden and Xi Jinping off against each other? It can't be done.
Impossible.
It's impossible. It's out of the question. I have to say, yes, I know the Chinese may be gloating about all of this, by the way, but I should make it very clear that I don't. I was really, really stunned and frankly rather shocked by the Anchorage episode. I mean, it seemed to me an astonishing thing. And the first time the Secretary of State of the United States has been treated in that way by another power, and done so in the most public fashion, being given a dressing down by a member of the Chinese Communist Party Politburo on American soil in full view of the cameras. I mean, I would never have believed it. I mean, I think back, as I said, to people like George Shultz and Cyrus Vance and all of those, and it's just inconceivable to me that such a thing could ever have happened, because there were real people with massive experience and other countries respected them. They don't respect Blinken and they can't respect Biden. And as for Kamala Harris, well, I'm not even going to start.
I think it was a watershed moment. I really, the more I watch the tapes, the more I think back on it. I mean, we're witnessing a turning point in history. And I think that this Alaska, this past week, may have been a defining moment in what's to come, and I'm stunned. I'm as stunned as you from what I saw.
Absolutely. Well, the Chinese are already talking about it as a landmark event, and the Chinese media is saying this is exactly what you said, that this is a moment of history. That from now on, these events will resonate around the world, and they will. I mean, there's no doubt about this. I mean, you can try and avoid talking about them in the US. You can try and limit the extent to which you report about them in Britain. But around the world, people are sitting up and taking notice. People in India, Prime Minister Modi of India, who has got all sorts of issues with China and is having to make some very careful decisions about the way India goes forward. He's going to be looking at this and he's going to be saying, is this really a country that we can rely on, the United States can really rely on? Can I just read again a thing that Global Times said?
Can you also expand on that as you read after the Times? Can you expand on the domino effect of this? Because I think you bring up a good point with Modi. I can think Modi, I can think Erdogan, I can think countries big and small, Merkel, Germany, Boris Johnson. I can think of countries big and small that will just take notice of this. And when I mean domino effect, they'll start to say, in my calculus going forward as I govern, I just now have to take into account that I can't rely on the diplomatic prowess or the sharpness of an American administration. So when I'm dealing with China, when I'm dealing with Germany or Russia, or whatever country it is, as I'm in the diplomatic arena, I just have to now take it for granted that the United States has kind of, been diminished. I mean, this is a big moment. Absolutely. And we've been calling this. We've been calling this for a long time. And CNN and MSNBC and New York Times are not going to report on this historic moment. And it really is a historic moment.
Well, it's interesting you asked me that because, in fact, the Global Times editorial I was going to read is on exactly that point, precisely that point. And it says the following: the most influential bilateral relationship in Eurasia is the China-Russia strategic partnership. To be honest, no country in the region can stand alone against either China or Russia, let alone fight against the two powers at the same time. It would be disastrous for any country which tends to confront China and Russia to forge an alliance with the United States. That is what Global Times, China's official newspaper, is saying. They're saying the United States is weak, it's poorly led, it doesn't know its business. We are strong. Together with Russia, we're even stronger. You can't depend on the United States if you want to have issues with us. So your only real option is to deal with us on our terms. And the Prime Minister of Japan, the Prime Minister of India, Modi, Angela Merkel in Germany, they're all going to be looking at all this. They're all going to be assessing all of this. And they're going to say to themselves, well, after what we saw in Anchorage, the Chinese are right. We can't rely on the United States in the way we once thought we could. And they will be going to Beijing, and they'll be going to Moscow, and they'll be trying to make whatever deals they can from a position where they no longer think that the United States is any longer a country that they can rely upon. The key country here to look at is India, because India has had tensions with China going all the way back to the 1960s, and their relationship with India is a fragile one, but they are not committed to a full-scale alliance with the United States. They're weighing their options, and it was very striking that US officials recently travelled to India. They met with Indian officials, and all sorts of statements were then released and published. And it was striking that those statements, those public statements, those communiques, omitted any reference to China at all. It's as if the Indians were saying, well, we listen to what the US says. We know what the problems the Chinese are creating, but we listen to what the US is telling us, and we are not convinced. We are not convinced that in the end, it is the US which is the solution to our problems. And Modi and his advisors and the Indian government has some of the most talented diplomats in the world. They are fully capable of making their own assessments and judging their own positions. And they will be looking at these events in Anchorage, and they will be looking at them with dismay and shock and saying to themselves, well, is this really the leadership? Is this a country with that kind of leadership that we really want to forge an alliance with? So that was the Chinese warning that I gave you in Global Times. And that is the lesson that more and more countries are going to learn. Angela Merkel's Germany, and of course it's not going to be Angela Merkel's Germany any longer, that too is in a transition period. She's leaving in September. There's uncertainties about who is going to take over. But all the indications are that the German political elite and business and commercial elite are saying that to themselves, well, it's China we need to go with, Russia we need to patch up relations with, the US we can't rely on them anymore, and of course they've just agreed a massive trade deal with China. So there you are, a good day's work, Mr. Blinken. Well, that's all I can say. You've managed to clarify things for all of us in a way that is deeply unhelpful for the United States. No wonder, as you rightly said, the Chinese wanted Joe Biden and his team to take over, because in Donald Trump they had an adversary they took seriously. In Biden and Blinken, they have two people that, frankly, well, they just walk over and treat with utter contempt.
Yeah. Guys, go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, help this channel out. Real quick, Alexander, I want to ask you a couple more, one more kind of comment from you. Go to the Duran shop. Make sure you're still subscribed to this channel, guys, and help us out, because our channel is just getting beaten up by the YouTube algorithms. But this is such an important topic that I just want to, a couple comments and a question. Absolutely, Modi, he's a top world leader, and I'm sure he saw the American delegation and the Biden delegation and said, these guys are jokers. So he's going to hedge his bets, as any good leader is going to do. Every good leader now is going to hedge against the United States. They're going to, they're going to lower their risk to too much exposure to the Biden White House. It's absolutely natural after seeing and I stress, just last week's performance must have been enough to rattle every single world leader in every single country. But my question to you is, Trump had it right, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, Trump's foreign policy
Absolutely.
was 100% correct. They didn't let him fulfill that policy. They didn't let him execute that policy. But his policy of engaging with China in a tough manner, but a professional but tough manner and negotiation stance, was the right policy. He pushed them. They pushed back. He pushed harder. They pushed back. It was a tug of war of two giants, of two superpowers, but Trump did not relent. And his strategy, which they did not let him execute, to engage with Russia and to try to find a way not to, I think that pulling Russia away from China, I think, that boat has already sailed. But it doesn't mean you have to make an enemy of Russia, and you can engage with Russia and make sure that whatever ties it has with China, they're not, so entrenched and so deepened that, you're basically dealing with two massive powers. He had it right. Trump had it right. And also keeping Europe on its toes. He had it right. They just didn't let him execute on that. And look at what the deep state, look at what the Democrats, look at what the system brought us. They brought us these guys, Biden and Blinken, and we're seeing the results of that play out.
That's exactly right. I mean, Trump did have it right. I agree. There is no conceivable way that Russia and China are going to become enemies again, in the way that they were in the 1960s. That boat, as you absolutely rightly say, that moment has passed. There's nothing the United States could do that would make them enemies. But they didn't have to be allies. If the United States had treated Russia with some understanding and some concern for, Russia's interests, had not pressed ahead with trying to bring, Ukraine and Georgia into NATO, hadn't imposed sanctions, hadn't done all of those kind of things, hadn't demonized Russia's leadership and its entire society and culture, then yes, I think Russia could have been persuaded to maintain a more independent policy towards China. That game has been completely lost. Donald Trump understood that. He understood that it is in US interest to try to break up this alliance system that is now starting to emerge. And he was stopped. He was blocked at every turn. And what is really extraordinary and very remarkable and very revealing is that we're starting to see hints from some people within the US foreign policy establishment who are grudgingly, but far too late, coming round to a realization of what a colossal mistake it was to alienate Russia in the way that has been done. And in effect, implicitly, to admit that Donald Trump was right. I mean, I've already discussed in several programs this very strange, study called the Longer Telegram, which is about US-China relations, and which talks about the importance for the US of rebalancing relations with Russia, of making concessions to Russia in order to pull it away from China, so as not to give China the sense of overwhelming power that it is now starting to acquire. But that wasn't done. It wasn't done when it could have been done, which is when Donald Trump tried to do it. And the way that Donald Trump was prevented from doing it has convinced the Russians that any kind of relationship with the United States is impossible, because what they see in the United States is a visceral hatred towards them. So given that that is so, the Russians and the Chinese have come together even more closely. This attempt to obstruct Donald Trump's policy, which, as you correctly said, was in America's interests. This successful attempt to obstruct Donald Trump's policy is going to be, in future, a massive historical, seen as a massive historical mistake by the US. And there are going to be histories stretching far into the future, discussing it and discussing how Donald Trump had this insight and understanding of America's real interests and its real problems, and how he was prevented from achieving and putting that into effect, and the disastrous consequences for the United States which will follow from it.
All right, guys, we'll leave the video there. Real quick, support our video sponsor, Affirm. Use the code Duran10, guys. You get a 10% discount of Affirm products, the best products for your health and for your lifestyle needs. You take this stuff and you use this stuff, and it's just, it's like the re-energized. You're re-energized and you're a new you. So go to Affirm, the website down below. Use the code Duran10 at checkout, and you get a 10% discount on all their products. We will leave it there. Alexander Mercurs, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.